Welcome to the We Are All Dying podcast. I am your host, Jenna Goodhand, and my hope is that through these conversations, you become more comfortable with your own death and conversations with others. On today's show, we have Cherrelle Sea, and we are talking about the decomposition of life, the ways in which culture influences how we celebrate or don't celebrate death, and the ways in which the losses in our life through death change us and allow us to connect to our more authentic selves. We'll just jump into it and kind of see where the conversation flows. But first of all, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so grateful to share space and time with you, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I don't know a lot about your life. I don't know a lot about your death. Who does? But how has death shown up for you in your life, or what do you think of when you think of death and dying and that cycle?
I think death and dying should be respected as much as birth and living. And respected in the sense, I'm not saying that people don't respect it. I think it's just not celebrated, and it is something to be celebrated. It's celebratory. If you walk through a forest, and I always relate to nature because that's just who I am, but you walk through a forest, like anything that is decaying is a gift, right? And so humans have this very peculiar way of, and this is my own lens, but honoring death, that is away from the celebratory aspect of it. So for me, I think death is enthralling. I am curious about death. I celebrate death. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so how has your life, your experiences kind of brought you to that place of thinking about it really in its full entirety and relating it to nature? And I love that word decay, right? What a horrifying word for humans to think about the fact that we're all decaying.
Okay, so I would say that this is very new for me to fully envelop and embrace death, because for a long time in my life, as much as I wasn't afraid of death, I had a sad relationship with death. And I think when my father died, I was 21, and it was very abrupt and shocking, and also woke me up. It forced me to live my life. I was on a trajectory that was very, I didn't care if I lived or died, and I had no respect for the living or the dying aspect of life. I don't think I was even present in this body until I lost my father. So that started it all for me. But I think really what got me into being excited about death was gardening, was composting, having a vermicompost, and just watching things decay and decompose and become something else. That's really what got me in a space that I am in now, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. And so when you're kind of exploring this, are there uses of language or things that you find problematic with people when you talk about sort of your interest, your fascination with death?
I would, my major concern with death and dying is I like to say that it's well-being is tied into how we die as well. So quality of life over the length of life. Instead of lifespan, I like to say health span. There are things also especially if you are a woman presenting, just because that's the lens that I have lived a lot of my life, is delaying death or anti-aging or old, or the term elderly. Those terms really they make me cringe, and I understand that that's the language that has been used in our modern times. It hasn't always been that way. There are many cultures that still carry on, respecting elders and enjoying their wrinkles and revering somebody who ages with a healthy, abundant life as, revered and to be, embraced and enveloped and cared for. The sadness of our society is, once you enter that stage of old or dying, people are so scared that a lot of the times we die alone, and we die in these homes, where workers, they are good people. I'm sure majority of them are good people, but they're burnt out because instead of celebrating that stage of life, it's just, getting by. It's giving them the meds. It's, you know, um, getting them to dying in general, without actually enjoying the human that is present, and their stories and the richness of their lives that they lived and what they have to give, especially in that crucial time of dying or knowing you're going to die. People change. There are parts of you that open up. The decomposition deepens that person. Maybe even if they weren't so open uh, for most of their living life. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I really signed up for this, by the way. I just was like, you know what? We're talking, and I'm just going to talk from my heart.
absolutely. Please do. What do you think, other than maybe a diagnosis or an accident or something, how do you think we can get people to kind of wake up to the fact that we are all dying, that this is something that should be relevant in your life, the fact that this is temporary and fragile?
I think something that was helpful for me, and so I recently took a death doula course with someone named Elua Arthur, and she is phenomenal. This is going to be a bit of a tangent to get around to what you're asking, but I remember seeing one of her videos on YouTube or something, popped up, and she's a death doula, and so I watched this maybe 10-minute video about her going to hospices and like helping people through that stage, the final stages of their life, and just feeling so drawn to it. Like, I was like, yeah, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't there people, just like birthing doulas? Why aren't death doulas a thing? Um, and so in taking her course many years later, one part of it is we're supposed to plan our deaths, right? We're supposed to plan what we want to happen, what happens after we die, and like getting really comfortable with the fact that, yeah, we're gonna die. And for a lot of us, I mean, for me, a little bit less, because of my relationship with death and dying, but it forces you to really think about that. Okay, we are dying. We're dying right now. We could die tomorrow. We could die in 10 years or 20 years, but like, what is the legacy you want to leave? How is it that you want to die? And understanding that your death should be your choice just as much as your life is your choice, right? So honoring also someone's wishes in dying, whether that's taboo, something such as, medically assisted suicide for somebody that is really unwell and that's their choosing, to something just as heartbreaking as, having cancer, and you have a more set timeline, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's just recognizing that is the first thing.
So, one of the things with, a birth doula is you kind of plan how you hope things go, but then like nothing else goes to plan. But also that you can like update your plan. So as it stands today, like what are your preferences around when you die?
My preferences for me when I die are a green burial, first and foremost. If it could be done, I would like for my loved ones to be present, or to come visit me, during that time of dying, if it so happens that way. But I want the most natural death possible. So whether that's just being buried in the ground to break down, or another like fantasy of mine is just being, I guess, like, I don't want to say dumped out at sea, but like put into the ocean and like let the animals have at it. Like it's very simple for me, the desires I have. And I'm comfortable dying by myself, but it would be really nice to be held in that time, to be like tucked in and spoken to, and even if it's just holding space and not having a conversation, yeah, as natural as possible. That's my desire.
Really beautiful. You mentioned how your dad's death really kind of shook your life up. Are you comfortable sharing a little bit more about that?
Yeah. It's funny because this year was actually like a hard year. Like, some years are harder than others. Difficult in the sense where I really felt my father's presence. I do all the time, but it just passed. It was February 22nd. Yeah, I was living a very self-destructive life, and me and my father had always been close. Since I was a kid, we've always been close. The story of his life is a long one too, but long story short, he was an immigrant here from Jamaica, and he chose some unfavorable ways of making money to make ends meet and got arrested and deported. So, like my last physical memory of him is still very fresh in my body, and it was in like one of those, I guess, like a house that you have for conjugal visits, and he made me oatmeal and watched National Geographic, and then he hugged me so tight while I was sleeping that like I felt like I was going to suffocate. But my dad always, like the parts that my mother were that I wasn't, like my mom was very emotionally unavailable and I was a very sensitive human. I still am. My father was that person for me. And so growing up, he'd write me letters and he'd call and like just teach me things about life that my mom didn't, have the time and space for me then to talk to me about. That's changed now, but yeah, so when he did die, there was like a 3 or 4 year period where I was really evading my father, and I didn't want, because I was ashamed of the life I was living, and I knew that it wasn't the life that he would have wanted for me. And but I just hadn't dealt with my trauma, and I chose instead to engage in a lot of drugs and dating women who, like for lack of better words, just were out to kill me. And so yeah, the day he died, the day I got the phone call, and I had a premonition before he died. He came to me in a dream, and so I knew he was going to die. Um, yeah, that same day, I packed up my things and I left my girlfriend at the time and decided I was gonna like live a life that my father would be proud of and that I could be proud of. Like, yeah, and I was squandering my life. I wasn't happy, and so I made the choice. I'm gonna actually do this thing, if not for myself, then for him. Yeah.
I love that. And so, how has your relationship with your dad evolved?
Um,
How do
I
you?
feel I feel as though even though he's gone, it doesn't matter. Like he's in me. I feel like if anything, it set the framework for how I am as a lover, as an individual, as a human, um, in relation with the world and with other people. I just think about, my father, even in Jamaica as a kid, I'd have people go on vacation to Jamaica. And, he worked at a resort and people will come back and tell me about my father and just how amazing he was and all the things he talked about me. And so I carry that forwards in life. And I also, now I'm just like, if I am ever to have another partner again, because right now I'm in this transitional period, they have to love me like my father loved me. Like they gotta. It's a high bar, but it's the bar that we all deserve, I think. Unwavering, sensitive, silly, at times embarrassing kind of love. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And so, do you have like rituals or ways in which you like communicate or interact with him?
I I I used to really intentionally kind of in the way that I grew up, as a recovering Catholic, like pray, but that's changed and shifted also. Oh yeah, another thing is also after he died, I really decided to get in touch with my blackness and my ancestry on that side because I've always been in the middle of, being too white or too black for either side of my family. And so now I do have a lot of practices where I speak with my ancestors, and that is really something as easy as like getting into some primordial movement or like putting on some good Afro beats and dancing, cooking a Caribbean meal that reminds me of my father, and writing. My father's, I have all his letters, and he's such a great writer, and I love writing. That's the way that I am able to open up. And so I think that honestly, just being myself is the best way to communicate with my father. Like I know inside when I'm making good choices because I feel my father like in me, like approving. And then, when I'm doing things that aren't so savory for my spirit, I feel it as well. Yeah. Yeah, I feel it.
I love that. Is there any other part of your lived experience that you just described that you think impacts your views on death, or maybe the culture that we live in now, it like prevents you from expressing your ideas or feelings around death, or
I no longer allow other people's within reason. I'm not here to necessarily disrespect anybody or cross a boundary, a firm boundary. However, I believe that I exist to be in a spectrum or in that space that people don't necessarily feel comfortable. I know that just me being who I am does make some people uncomfortable. So I think for me, it's a little bit easier to be transparent about how I feel about living and dying. And, for the most part, people that I would consider my elders, I connect to them more because I am comfortable with that aspect of life. I'm not trying to run away from that. And instead, I stand there with open arms, and I want people to feel safe and comfortable to discuss those things with me as long as they are comfortable. But yeah, I don't hold back from that. I don't. I think that things need to be spoken about. I think that if we are uncomfortable, that's where the growth happens. Including myself. Of course, there are a lot of things that make me uncomfortable with the way that the world approaches death, or even won't say dying or dead. Like, they passed, or they transition, and if that makes them feel, if that's the language they need to use, that's cool. But I try my best to say words like death and dying, or died, like just to make it to make it be what it is. Similar to, like, this is a tangent in a way, but like, and I am a vegan that does respect people who do eat animals in an ethical way. There is a way to do that. But the grocery store, you see all these packages of meat, and it's labeled, pork or what, a chicken breast, and it's like, and it's just so separate from the actual act of them dying. Like, it's a dead animal. We create labels to make us feel safer. And then if you really think about it, that's what makes death scary, because then when you're faced with that and you don't know what the hell is really going on or how to talk about it, it makes it harder to talk about, and that's what causes separation. And then you end up with regrets.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, through these conversations, it's come up a lot. Like, death is very isolating for those who didn't die, because we don't know how to talk to each other. We don't want to make people feel upset. We haven't used the word death, and it leaves people kind of on their own to navigate some really hard stuff. And yeah, I think labels, language in all categories of humanity are very problematic, and they're selected for certain reasons. But I think we both agree let's open them all up. let's say what it is, right?
Might as well. I mean, especially in the time we're living in now, let's be real. The planet is dying. And instead of going against it, like, or thinking that we can control it, like, we should really just be listening to what is, instead of coming up with theories, whether they hold truth or not, as to what is happening. Instead, like, really just look at the simplicity of it all, and it will dispel a lot of shame and fear, which that's what we need. That's why we're feeling so anxious, and why the need to control things is present, and create labels for certain reasons, for the sake of peace, for lack of better words, when really, I mean, yeah, peace is an interesting word. I love peace, but what one might consider peace and another might consider peace are two very different things. So let's talk about it. That's cool.
Absolutely. So like, one of the things that I'm changing my language around is that I was always communicating that life is the opposite of death, but actually birth is the opposite of death, right? And life is kind of that in between where we get to see what's up. So when you're thinking about, this in between, on your way, what are some things that, like, you want to bask in as much as possible before death? Are there things that just make you feel like, fuck, this is so good?
Yeah. I'm gonna get emotional because, okay. Yeah. So, like 2 winters ago, I attempted suicide, and it wasn't my first time. It will be my last time. um, And because I felt as though I wasn't enjoying my life, I did have moments of joy. I still have moments of joy. And this is no shade on anybody who does live a life where they're always busy and, you know, in the rat race, so to speak. Or I mean, I don't know. Who am I to judge? For me and myself, I felt as though there was no hope for me, because as much as I've loved London, and I've loved a lot of aspects of living in a city, um, I need to be in nature. And so I made the decision to buy land in Nova Scotia. And, I figured I'm working my butt off already. I might as well, have a shorter goal and do the thing. And it was terrifying, and it still is terrifying. I leave April 1st. And so the, the thing for me is to slow the hell down, like slow the fuck down and just be like, there's nowhere to rush. Like, you don't have to be anything other than who you really are. Like, you don't have to live a life that is a narrative that has been presented to you with choices as A, B, C, D, whatever. You don't need a degree, you don't need a career, you need happiness. And acknowledging that with happiness does come sadness, but whatever makes you feel fulfilled is what you should do. And I use the word should very little, because I have a weird association with that word should, but you should live a life that for you feels fulfilling. Like, what is livelihood to you? And if that is having a career and having kids and having material things, or like a nice, like whatever that is, if that is truly your calling, then to live it. Because I've just seen so often that people work really hard their whole lives, and then by the time they can retire, they're sick, and then there's nobody really in their lives that can help them or be with them. We're too fast. Everything is so fast. We just need to slow down. So what I do right now in the city is I just got back from that. I go for a long walk. And I mean, I make herbal medicines and I do deliveries on foot, and that's just like a benefit of it. But I go in the woods every day. I go in the woods every day. I listen to music every day. I dance, and I take a long hot bath at the end of my days. And really, I'm just looking forward to having ample time and space to process everything that's happening as well. Yeah, being present.
Mm, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. Gotta be like my dog. He's in my lap right now. Honestly, he's a Velcro dog. um, he's changed my life a lot too. This one, he was actually going to be put down. He was rescued from the Chinese meat market and had a lot of trauma, and a lot of people who he passed through a few hands, and they didn't know how to handle him. And I was just like, well, sounds like me. I've been through a lot of hands, and I had trauma that I didn't know how to deal with. And all you need is just somebody who's going to take the time to allow you to process it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you used a really interesting word, livelihood. And I think, that is like a present shift I just had with that word, because we've very much in our culture used the word livelihood as like, what are you going to do for work to survive, essentially, right? Nothing about pleasure, nothing about enjoyment, but just like for your livelihood. And again, I don't know where that word came from, so like let's just forget it though, because we're playing with words. But like, what does that word mean to you? Like, can you like expand a little bit on like, you're building a livelihood for yourself, you're moving out east, you've probably dreamt of this like so many times, you probably feel it in your soul, like what's the key?
I think that livelihood, I don't know I am going to look this up after now, because I am curious about the word itself. But for me, when I think of like livelihood, I think of like neighborhood, and it's like, so maybe it's a container, so to speak, or a space code, so to speak, where you feel lively, where you feel abundant, where you feel vitality, or you feel able to just live. And so I mean, throughout my whole life, there are many career paths I've fancied or thought about, and I've led a very unconventional life, and I've had many challenges that have prevented me from pursuing, like, let's say, the normal path, or the usual path of, like, you know, I didn't graduate high school. I didn't go to college or university. And, because I grew up so fast, I lived on the streets from the ages of 13 to 16. And so for me, survival was the thing. And now I want to thrive. And I'm grateful for the survival skills that I have. Oh my goodness. Um, but yeah, livelihood just means to me, living a life where you feel fulfilled, whether that's like you're satisfied with, one day sleeping in and drinking tea, and that's all you need to do. Like, you don't need to do anything else. Or, for me, I do love working hard. So so everyone keeps asking me, what are you going to do? Like, out in Nova Scotia. And I'm like, I'm going to homestead. I'm like, yeah, but what are you going to do? And I'm like, homestead. 24-hour, like, you're living with the seasons. There is hard work to be done, like with gardening and harvesting and building, and just watching also the land, because you have to do that for a full year before you do anything permanent. There's just something so sexy to that, like, to me, like, I'm so pulled to that. And I say sexy because being turned on is, it's a vital source to tap into, to feel alive. So for me, it's like, yeah, if whatever makes you feel turned on and pleasured, and joyous, then you should follow that path. And if that is following a career that is typical, or if that's homesteading, or being a mother, which is a wonderful job, or a good friend, a good lover, or even just being on your own. Yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that, but
I love it. So, what do you, are there anything that you want to do with your time left that you,
that, like, a goal, like goals.
well, doesn't have to be.
Yeah, I want, for me, I'm going to say that because there are, like, some things I want to do before I quote unquote go. And I feel like I feel like every day I do that, actually, because there is a part of me, I am a human that has encountered a lot of health scares, and I do have a lot of health issues come up, genetics and trauma. So I try to do, like, every day I live, maybe not as, like, as if it were my last, something as dramatic as that, but you know, but yeah, at the same time, yes. And so I just smile at strangers, and I go out in nature. But I would say physical goals, or like goals that are tangible, tactile, or I really want to publish my writing, my poetry. It's been on the back burner for way too long. And it's just waiting for it to happen. I just need the time and space to do so. So I think the first step, which I've already done, is get land, which is amazing. Um, and then do something with that land that I can leave for my family. Like, I've written my will. My land is to be given to my family, and a few of my loved ones. And I feel like I've already done. I've done what I needed to do. I my fear is to die in the city. I don't I'm not scared of dying. It's just more like where I die or how I die. So, I mean, fingers crossed I make it to April 1st. I think I will. um, I feel complete, actually. I really feel complete. I do. Yeah.
If there's something you want people to take away from this conversation, a new way of looking at life or death, or something in between, is there something you want to give people as a message, or something to align with?
I would say never take anything for granted. And that's something that we all hear, but I mean, just in the simplicity of being. When you wake up and you open your eyes and you could take a deep breath in and out, when you can get out of bed, if you are an able-bodied person, as an able-bodied, and if you're not an able-bodied person, but just everything you do in your life. And I mean, obviously that's within reason, because I am also guilty of going on autopilot. But every time you bring yourself back to being present, whether you're in autopilot or not, that's a gift. Like, remember that you breathing is a gift, and one day you will not. And that is also a gift, but be there for the gift that is right now, because you don't get it back. Time is the most precious commodity, not money, not what you give to the world, not your role in the world or who you are to other people. It's who you are to yourself, and therefore who you are into the cycle of life, the circle of life in the world. Um, yeah. So if you could just don't take anything for granted and recognize every little gift that is. That's what I would like for people to do.
Beautiful. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming and having this conversation with me. It's such a gift to know you, and I'm so sad you're leaving my city, but I will follow you somehow.
You are welcome to come visit. Honestly, once I'm settled, I come visit. The East Coast is beautiful, and I have a little 2 acres, and there's a lake, and um, yeah, you are more than welcome to come visit. Yeah.
I'm going to put that on my list of things to do before I die.